Welcome to Liminal Journeys. I'm your host, Easton Sanders. Imagine a world that exists just beyond the edge of our reality. A world where the impossible is possible and the extraordinary is ordinary. A place where the rules of logic and reason are bent and anything is possible. Join us as we explore the liminal spaces between reality and imagination, where the boundaries of what's possible are pushed to their limits. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I hope you've all had a good weekend. I certainly have. Me and my wife took a short trip out of town. We left on Thursday and went up to Branson, Missouri. For those that don't know, my wife is pregnant, and Zeke is expected to join us in about mid-April. And although we are looking forward to it, we knew we wanted some time to ourselves. One last adventure before the baby gets here and takes up all of our attention. So it was good. We had a blast, did some fun stuff, but I do think we're both happy to be back home. While we were on our way up there, I was listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet, and if you haven't checked out his podcast before, I highly recommend it. He's very good at what he does, and he's always got something interesting to talk about, or he'll have an interesting guest on all the time. I mean, he does a really good job. And this week, I was listening to one of his episodes where he interviews Craig Webb, who is, if I'm remembering correctly, I could be misremembering this a little bit, but I think he was a dream researcher at Stanford University, and his whole thing was about being intentional with your dreams, how if you're intentional with your dreams, you can utilize them to get responses, to get answers to your problems, or to even come up with ideas. One of his big things was there are many bands that have pulled award-winning songs from their dreams. So I thought this was really interesting, and I put some of his advice to good use. He said, before you go to bed, perhaps meditate on asking your subconscious to give you some information that you need to know, to tell you something you need to know. And I did this, and I was astonished by the results. Every day we were out of town, I had dreams. And I don't usually remember my dreams. It's rare that I do. But I followed exactly what he said. He said to ask your subconscious to tell you something you need to know. He said that was a good jumping off point. So I did that. And then his other piece of advice was when you do dream, make a note of the dream. Wake up gently, if at all possible, and grab your phone, pull up the Notes app, and just make a note of the dream, and it'll get easier to recall your dreams if you do this. And I did this, and I was astonished at the results. Every night I had dreams, and they got easier and easier to remember as the vacation went on. So this was very cool. I don't know yet that this is information that my subconscious wants me to know, but, we'll see. I just thought it was really cool. And his podcast, again, is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. I'll have a link to it in the description. It's definitely worth checking out. For today's episode, things are going to look a little bit different since we were traveling. I didn't have a lot of time to plan things out, but I still have something that I think will be fun in store. I'm going to talk about some of my personal paranormal experiences that I've had, and I'll also mention a couple of paranormal experiences that have happened to people close to me. So the way I'm going to go about this is I'll start at the earliest experience that I remember and work my way up to the most recent. The first paranormal experience that I can recall, I was very young. I had to have been maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, somewhere around there. And I was playing with a friend of mine, our neighbor, in his yard. Now, there wasn't anything around this yard. There was a shed, but beside the shed and beside his home, there wasn't really anything else there. And something weird started to happen. We started hearing this disembodied voice. And from what I remember, we searched high and low. We searched this whole area. We could not find anyone else that could have been talking to us. So it really felt paranormal to us at the time. And the voice, it was telling us not to drive when we turned 16. And that's all it was doing. It just kept repeating that when we turn 16, when we are able to, we should not drive. That was literally all of the substance to it. It was very, very strange. And I remember we went and got my mom, and we ended up getting his mom as well. And they both came over to the area we were at. And of course, naturally, the voice was no more. It was gone, not talking to us any longer. But still, both of our moms looked around a little bit as well. None of us found anything. It was very, very odd. The next interesting experience that I had was a number of years later. Not too many, though. I would assume, if I had to guess, I was probably 13 years old, around there. And my uncle was going to be taking me hunting that next morning. And anytime that happened, I had trouble sleeping. So naturally, I was not able to sleep, and I was up very, very late. I was just going to be up all night. And I was sitting in our living room watching TV, and in our living room, in the corner, there was a rocking chair. What happened was, as I was sitting there, this rocking chair started to move itself, started rocking all by itself. And I was very creeped out. And I just sat there watching this rocking chair go from sitting perfectly still, as it had been all night long, to slowly rocking back and forth, and picking up speed. Kept getting faster and faster. But that's all it did. It just rocked. Now, I remember looking. There wasn't any air vents or anything like that could have caused this to move. And this was out of the ordinary. This rocking chair did not start rocking itself. And so my response was weird. I was creeped out. I was scared. But my response was to sit on top of whatever paranormal entity was in the rocking chair. In my young mind, I thought the best thing to do would be to sit down on top of the chair myself and establish my dominance. And so that's what I did. I sat down in the chair, and then I got up, and guess what? No more rocking. The rocking ceased to happen all on its own. So it was very odd indeed. While I'm talking about that house, it was a different house than the one from the first story. But while I'm talking about that house, I'll go ahead and mention some of the other strange things that happened in that house. One of those things involves my grandma, and she lived in the basement. The basement was fully furnished. Fully furnished isn't the right words, I guess. The basement was built out to be a living space of its own. It had a kitchen, it had a bathroom, bedrooms, and a living area. And my grandma was living down there, and my family was living upstairs. So when we got this house, what I will mention, it was very creepy in the basement. The previous owner, I'm not sure what was going on with him, but there was obviously something happening. One of the bedrooms in the basement had all sorts of creepy symbols painted on the wall. I can remember a pentagram. I can remember just really evil-looking doodles that were painted onto the wall. So the house had a creepy feeling from the beginning, and but we didn't, in the grand scheme of things, we didn't have a lot of creepy stuff happen there, but this thing that happened to my grandma was definitely near the top of the list. So, as she tells the story, she was watching the movie The Ring. I don't know if she got tired of the movie or if she finished the movie. Either way, she turns off the TV and she goes to one of the bedrooms or the bathroom. She leaves the room. And when she leaves the room, all of a sudden the TV turns itself on. So she goes back in there, frustrated, wondering what's going on, turns the TV back off, leaves the room again, and the TV comes back on again. So she rushes in there, starting to get a little bit creeped out, but she turns that TV off one more time, and she leaves the room. And wouldn't you know it, the TV comes back on a third time, all by itself. So she goes back in there, fully creeped out at this point, turns off the TV once again, and leaves the room. And then the fire alarm downstairs goes off. The smoke alarm. And, of course, there was no smoke. Fully creeped out. I don't know what she did after that, but I know she was terrified. We heard about it over and over and over again. So that was her experience in the house, and that might have been her only experience paranormal-wise in that house. I'm not sure, but that is certainly the one that she told the most. One other paranormal experience that I'll mention that took place in that house, this one actually happened to my brother, not my youngest brother, but the middle brother. His name is Elijah, and he had a bunch of weird stuff happen that he, even to this day, is adamant that these things were not dreams, that they were really happening. And the one I can remember offhand, a little bit short, is that he remembers laying in his bed, awake, and not experiencing sleep paralysis. He notes that he was not paralyzed, so it was not sleep paralysis. And he said these angelic-looking beings, these white beings, enter the room, and they walk over to his dresser, and they set a box on top of his dresser, and they walk out. And he said they stayed gone for quite a while, but he said he was too terrified to get up and to examine the box. And so he just sat there, or laid there rather, terrified in his bed. And he said eventually those beings re-entered the bedroom, went over, retrieved the box, and left. I'll have to see if I can get him on the show sometime, because I know he had many other paranormal experiences in that house, and otherwise, maybe I can get him on the show to tell us some more of his paranormal experiences. Matter of fact, if you want to hear him tell some of his other experiences, let me know. Send me an email, LiminalJourneysPodcast@gmail.com. Send me an email, let me know, and I'll see if we can do that. Another short experience I'll share. I was at a friend's house, and I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and there were a bunch of us kids over there, and we were playing hide and seek, and me and my friend Chris, we immediately ran towards the basement. Now, there was nobody down there. It was just us, and we're positive about that. But what's interesting is, as we were running downstairs, I remember thinking that my friend Chris was to my right. And as we made it to the bottom of the stairs, I can remember seeing he was wearing all white. Interesting. And then he runs off to the right of me into this other back room. And so I go to the left, because I think, okay, well, we're both going to hide down here. I'll go somewhere different. So I go off to a room to my left, and when I open the door and get in there, sure enough, it's my friend Chris. And he's not wearing all white. Surprise, surprise. So I am freaked out at that point, and I turn around and I run back into the room to the right, And Chris comes with me, and I'm telling him about this, and we go in there, and there's nobody in there. So what was this? Well, at the time, we were happy believing that it was an angel, and I think I'll stick with that. So for my last paranormal story, I was probably about the same age, 14 or 15 years old, and me and my brothers were outside in the backyard playing. It was after dark. Now, at this point in my life, I'll note that I was always outside after dark, watching the sky. I was passionate about the paranormal, particularly aliens, and I really wanted to see UFOs, wanted to see aliens. So every single night, I was in the backyard watching the sky. And this particular night, me and my two brothers were all playing back there, and we noticed a strange set of lights spinning against the ground. There were 6 of them, and they were each individually rectangle-shaped, and they were all moving at the same speed in a circle as if they were all part of one singular object. Now, the way the lights were displayed on the ground, you would imagine that there was something in the sky directly above us that was beaming these lights on the ground and causing them to spin in this circle. But from what we remember, it was a clear night. There was nothing above us in the sky. And the way that neighborhood was, we did have neighbors, but none of them were close enough to where they could have been beaming something on the ground doing this. It would have been impossible. And like I said, the way that these lights looked anyway, I would imagine there would have had to have been something directly above us beaming these lights onto the ground. And we ran into these lights. We played around them. We looked up, tried to see where they could be coming from. We were totally amazed. This was incredible. We just witnessed these lights for several minutes, and then we went inside to try to get Mom and Dad, and they wouldn't come outside, so we went back outside, and the lights were gone. And that is the strangest thing that I have experienced. I can't even begin to imagine what this was, but if you have any ideas, please let me know. I want to hear your thoughts. And I'll tell one last story that took place at that house, and then we'll wrap up. So, I was laying in bed, and I was having trouble sleeping from what I remember. And my door was shut, or so I thought it was. It was at least pushed to, but I don't know that it was clicked in. But I was laying in bed, and I was facing the wall, and all of a sudden, I hear my bedroom door pop open. And I don't hear anything else, but I hear the door pop open, and I hear it creak as it opens wider and wider. And in my mind, I'm imagining that Mom or Dad are looking in. They're checking on us. And so I keep laying there. And then, all of a sudden, after a couple of seconds, I feel what seems to be someone standing on the bed, where someone has just climbed up on the bed. And I feel what I think are footsteps walking towards me on the bed. So I get myself psyched up, and I fling the blankets up, and I'm going to run out of the bedroom. But as I fling the blankets up, my cat Mischief goes flying across the room. My poor cat Mischief. But it was just so funny after the fact that when I decided I got the courage, I was going to jump up and run out, and then that poor cat just goes flying across the room. So that's it. That's my stories that I can at least remember right now. I'm sure I've had others that I'll remember later. If others do come to mind, I'll write them down, and maybe we'll do a second part in the future. And like I said, maybe I'll get my brother on, and we'll expand upon some of those other stories. I know my mother-in-law has had a really, really interesting paranormal experience. I would love to talk to her as well, so maybe we'll get her on the show too, and we'll talk about this again in a future episode. But for now, I hope you've all enjoyed this. If you did, please rate and review the show and share it with your friends. I see that some of you are doing that, and it is definitely helping. I can't even begin to tell you how much I really appreciate it. For those that don't know, you can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and we have a Facebook page. So if you would like to follow us elsewhere, you can find us there. If you have a story you would like to share on the show, give us a holler. You can find my contact info in the description. And until next time, I'm Easton Sanders, and this is Liminal Journeys.